today we are going to be learning how to create a drop-down search component. And so I have spin up my using Vue.js. We're going to be doing this with Vue.js. So I've spin up created a Vue.js project and it's running on localhost. And yeah, this is basically we're going to be something similar to this, right? With a search feature, and you can also filter. So Michigan, and yeah, we're going to be something similar to these, and the UI might be a little bit different than what we have here, but it's going to have the same functionalities whereby you can search and you can filter for items in the dropdown and select an item. So without any further ado, let's get right into coding this. Yeah, so pardon me, the UI might not be the best UI, but we really want to focus on the functionality here. So we can start with this. Let's give it a base component. Let's call this section with the class of dropdown wrapper. And yeah, so this is going to be sort of the wrapper for the whole component. And I want to have another something similar to this, like this particular wrapper that holds a selected item. So we can call this that selected item. So I'm just using a shortcut to create these classes, this class names rather, selected item, and we can add a span and say select items. Right, so yeah, this looks good, and we'll deal with the CSS later. So let's just create the bare HTML structure of this old component, and we should have, I think it's going to be nice if we have a drop down icon. We can do that later. So basically this is, once you select, this is the wrapper holding a selected component. Now we need to create an input and also the drop down section itself. Alright, for us to do this, we are going to create another div holding the whole input and the drop down. Let's call it the drop down popover. Right, let's call it a drop down. It's weird having this class names are weird, but just let's continue. And we should have our inputs. Our input should be type of text. We need a V model. So if you're conversant with Vuejs, you know what V model is, a two-way binding. We'll use it for two-way binding, and let's call this search query, and let's also give this a placeholder of search for user. Let's use user, and boom, yeah, we have that already. Good. So this is basically going to be the search, just like how we have a search here, right? We're also going to have list of an element to hold a list of options or list of items we want to display. So with these, I'm going to create another element. Let's create a div called options, and this we're gonna have a UL, and I need, let's say, at least 5 LIs. So the first one, let's name, yeah, just random tech bros or tech guys. I know Kiki Adams, Jalasem, Geek Maras, Mr. Dolat, that's I have one more person. Let's see. Any random name. I love Sarah Drasna. Sarah Drasna. Yeah. So this is going to be like the list of this drop down here, which we've done here. So I think we can get right into styling all these components, all these elements rather. So let's come down here, scopes. I'm going to be using lang SCSS, right? And let's look at this drop down wrapper first, right? And the drop down wrapper. For these, let's make the max width of let's say 350 pixels, and position should be relative because we're going to be using an absolute inside of it. And what else? We need the margin should be a 0 auto, so we can have it aligned in the center of our page. Boom. All right, good. Now we need to style the selected item. You can see here, once you select an item, it's in this beautiful border. It has a beautiful border around it, and we can also have that for this selected item here. So let's go in here, the selected item, and for selected item we want the height to be, let's say, for the px, for the pixels. Let's come back here so we can see the changes for the pixels, and we want a border of 2px solid. Let's do light gray. Okay, good. We can have a border radius of about, let's see, 8 pixels, and no, 8 is too much. 5 pixels, and is in the room. How to charge this? Mommy's phone. Border radius of 5px. Let's see, 5px. Okay, and what else? We can make these have a pattern of top 5px and left and right of 10px. Let's see, good. And let's get a display of flex. Justify content, want it to be between, space between, and align items, want it to be centered. So yeah, because I'm still going to be adding, I still have plans to have a drop down here, right? So space between would be good. So I can see we have this field here. We have this field here already. Good. And so let's make these font size. Let's make it, let's say, 16 pixels. Font weight. I want semi-bold. Also on font weight medium. Oh, sorry. Tailwind CSS is taking over. What's wrong? Okay, it's working. Just to be sure. Okay, let's make this 20. Yep. So yeah, this is good. This is good so far. And we need to come down and style this drop down pop over, right? And to do that, we should do the drop down pop over. And for the pop over, we're going to make it a position of absolutes. So it's going to be relative to the drop down wrapper, right? And we want to make it also have a border. So px solid light gray as well. We want the top we're getting that feel. And I think for now this is good. For now this is good. So let's start the input now. Since the input is inside the drop down pop over, so we can start this input here. And you can say inputs. We want to make it the width 100%. Okay. Let's say 180 or 90. Yep. Yep. So want to give it a height of 30 pixels and border TPX solid light gray. And so here we also want a font size of 18 pixels. Let's use 16 pixels. And pattern left of 5 pixels. Yep. So this is good. Yeah, this is good. So I think we're just missing something. This is, you can see here, we need a padding around this. So let's do pattern 20 px. So now I think we need to make this a max width. Oh great, yeah, so we solved that. So if you noticed, it's glowing out, so we need to make this a max width 100%, so that should solve these issues. So we can reduce the padding to 10. Yep, I think this looks good. This looks good. All right, so what else? What else? What else? What else? Do we need padding left for this? No. Okay, this is the input here. We need the pattern left. I think we can still further increase this to 8 pixels. And we also need to style these options here. Right. So options. We also want to make the width 100%. We need the UL. For the UL, we want the list style none. What else? We need the text align to move to the left hand side, so text align left. And what else? What else? What else? What else? What else? Yeah, so let's remove the padding from the left. Padding left 0. Okay. 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 And we should make this 5 or 8 pixels. Okay, great. And what else can we do? We can give this max height of, let's say, max height of 200 pixels. And what else? And overflow Y wanted to be scroll. So then that's for the style the list. So for the list, we want the width 100%, and we want a border bottom within each list. Vuejs, solid, and light gray. Great. You can give this a pattern of 10 pixels. Oops, overflow. Okay. So why do we have this in our overflow X hidden? So we take that away, and let's reduce this so we can see if we have to scroll. Let's make this 180. Yeah, so with 180 you can find the scroll here. And I really want to put this with it Vuejs. Let's see, a border 1px, solid, light gray as well. Okay. No, I don't like this. Since we're going to style the list element, so then let's give this a background color of F1, F1, F1. Yep. And what else we can do? Cursor, let's make it pointer. All right. So at this moment, we can start doing the magic. I think now we need to bring in this carrot. So I use remix icon once I need icons. I come down to remix icon. You can search arrow up remixicon.com. I need this up carrot, copy SVG, and so I'm gonna just drop this here. Right. I'm gonna drop this here and give this a name of class drop down icon. Yep. So remember we give the parents a display of flex and justify content space between. So that's what we have this here. Then let's begin to add the JavaScript part. So coming out to our script, we need to define our data and return an object. So we really need three major parameters. We need the search query. Remember, the search query is, we need to define it here to make our two-way binding occur. Search query here. So this Vue model tries to check our local data to check if we have this variable search query. Then we also need a selected item, so which is going to be null at the first instance, and we also need a state to toggle this visibility, just like we have here. It's toggle the visibility of this list. So let's say is visible. It's just going to be false. Default state is initial state is going to be false. And so here we can add an onClick to trigger this search and drop down. So we can say a click is visible is equals to not visible. Not is visible. So what this is basically doing is changing the state of this variable is visible to true or false, and we can use that to conditionally render these particular part of our component. And to just show you an easy view, we can just use the if directive. If it's visible, display it so it's not visible. Once we click on this, it makes it's visible true. Because it's false, it makes it true now. So we can find this part of our component visible to the users now. And what we want to do now would be to let's try and use the data. Let's try and fetch data from the backend or from an external API, because this is what you're most likely going to be doing on a job or on a project. So with that, we can get an API from JSON placeholder. So let's unmounted. Let's try to get random users. Right. So let's try to get random users, and we can query an endpoint. I think let's just quickly do that. JSON placeholder. So basically we need users. All right, good. So copy this endpoint here. So I can do this fetch and this. Oh, sorry, we need it then, not. And what is coming is a response, and we want that response to be JSON, and the then that JSON or JSON, whatever you love to pronounce it, JSON, you know what I mean. We can do this then console.log JSON. So let's see the kind of data we're getting. So let's inspect and check our console. These are errors we've had, so let's just refresh to be sure that there are no errors. This is an error from one of my extensions here. So good, you have our data here, which is coming from an API, and we can just have a user array. Let's call it user array. This is going to be an array, so we can just say these.user array is equals to JSON. So with this now also, that means we have this data coming from the API. We've binded it to our local data, which is the user array. So with this, we can now render these users on our UI components. So we can take out these guys. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Gigmaras. Thank you, guys. And we can just use a v4 to look through. We're going to be needing user, and we need the index in user array, right? We need the key as well. Yeah, Vue would let you know that you need the key. And so I love to make my keys this way, using template literal, and I just pass the index. So then let's render user. So now let's check our UI. So you can find out that every user is an object, right? Every user is an object. So we would need to access the key of the name, which is .name. So with that, we should be able to get their names directly. Good. This is good. This is great progress here so far. And yeah, this is great progress so far. So what is left is how can we search, and this we're going to do right now. So for us to do this search, we're going to be using the computed properties, right? So we can use the computed properties to return a value, and on that value we can run certain computations, or we can format those values to however we want to render them. So let's create a computed property, and so at the moment we're rendering this from the user array. So we're rendering this from the user array, but for us to get a better feel, and for us to be able to use a filter, so that as you search, it filters through this list and check, okay, whose name matches this search parameter. So for us to do this, let's call this computed, let's call this property filtered user. Yeah, filtered user. So now what we want to do is, by default, if this is an empty string, yeah, it's saying that it's expected to return a value. This will fix later. So what we want to do now is first we want to get this search query. Remember, we're going to be using this search query to filter. So we want to say const query is equals to these.search query dot to lowercase. Let's just first transform this to a lowercase. Then we can say that if this.search query is equal to an empty string, if the user hasn't typed anything, just return all the data in the user array, right? So yeah, this is a linting error. Query is assigned but value has never been used. So for us to use the query now this is where the real magic happens. I might need to expand this. This is where the real magic happens, where the real filtering magic happens. So I'll write the code and explain what each line of the code is performing. So now let's assume that the user begins to add a query. What we want to do is return in our user array, return this.user array. We want to filter from the user array a user, or yeah, one filter a user, right? Now in that user, because each user is an object, so we want to do this, return objects dot values. I will explain this line of code, these lines later. Just let me finish this. Return object dot values, right? So object dot values kind of create like an arrays of iterable values. So we can look through each object in our array. Each object in our array, we can look through the values, right? And check for items. Let's use item here. And dot sum. So remember, this itself is returning an array, so we can use this dot sum array method on it to check again that within those values we want to check for some words, right? I think I need this in another parenthesis. Some words, right? And return where we need. Let's convert this to a string again. Word dot to lowercase. Now that includes our query. So I think I made a mistake here. So item is defined. Oh, we used user here. So basically, yes, this is user. Yeah. So let me explain this code again. Now, we are saying that if the user, if it's an empty string, right, it should return everything. Else, return this array. And within this array here, remember these are from the array. Within this array, filter where a user in each of these objects. Remember, these values are from an object whose object.value returns an array itself. Since this returns an array of iterable values, we can use the array method of .sum to check that within those values, check for the ones whose, or using the word here, whose word or whose values or strings or data within those values include whatever search query we're going to be typing here. So this is basically where the magic is happening, and we can just replace this our computed property with the user array and save, and you can see that we should have the same thing. So just like we said, if the search query is empty string, which is empty string, return all, or if there is a search query, begin to run this particular code here, which is what it's going to do by the time we begin to search Clementine Bouch, Clementine to Bouch. This is lovely. This is lovely. This is absolutely lovely. And I think this is great progress so far. This is great progress. So now our filtering functionality is working well. Let's try to search for someone else, Curtis. So now this doesn't just search for name. This, based on those lines of code here, what we did was to check that in each object, check the values, check in each of this object, check the values. So it's going to check, look through these values here and find that where does this particular parameter, this search query, matches the word Curtis, and it returns that particular object here. So that is how we've been able to do this. And going by our design here, once you click on an item, it should display on as a selected item. So let's quickly do that. We can add an on click here that once we click, we want to make this selected. Let's call it a method that selects item. So this is going to be a method that we're going to create, that once you click, it should select the item, and we're going to pass user into that method. And we can come down here to create the methods, and let's call this select item. So we're passing in the user, so we have to get the user as well, and we can say this dot selected. So we want to make this user, which we passed from this method here, once we click and we'll try to run this particular method, we want to pass the user and ensure that the user is our selected item. So we can say this the selected item is equal to user, right? And we need to put in a comma here. So with that, let me close this. So with that, we can change what we're rendering as a selected user here. Here we can now say that we want to render selected item. Remember, this is an object. We're passing in an object, right? So remember, this is an object, but we need the name, so we have to do this. Then we have the name here. Yeah, this is great. This is great progress. And once you click Patricia Lipsack, but when we look at this behavior, you can find once you click on this, it closes this list. So we can also do that by saying once we've selected, let this close. We can do that in that same method right here. Where's our method? So once it's selected, we also want to make this dot is visible to be equals to false. So it shouldn't be visible once we made a selection. What happened? I think we have an error somewhere. Need to fix this. Okay. Saying here that name of null. Okay, great. Now this error is as a result of the page being reloaded. So once the page is reloaded, it cannot have access. This selected item is null, and we're having a null value. It cannot access this name here, so it has to throw an error. So what we can do now is use a condition to say if there is a selected item, render this, else let's render something else by saying select user. So let's make this v else. So if there is a selected item displayed, else render select user. So this should solve. Yeah, this has solved it. So select user. Good. So even if the page reloads, if it can't find a selected user, it just renders this. Yeah, this is great. So let's yeah, great. So this was what caused the error. As a result of the page being reloaded, it could not find this, but we can use this condition to check that error out and stop it from happening. Then I think this is great progress so far. You can select, good, you can filter, Patricia, you can do Chelsea. Yeah, great. So another thing we can do is whatever user tries to post something that is not correct, we should be able to notify them that hey, there are no data here. So we can easily do that by we can easily do that. Put that under the input here and make it span and say no data available. And this would only occur. We're only going to render this if, remember this whole thing is an array. This filtered user is it's returning an array. So, and if it doesn't match, it returns an array of 0 length. So we can just say if filtered user dot length is equal to 0. So you can see no data available, right? And that's because we have no data. Good. So, but if there's a data, we should have good. Graham, great. So our filtering is working, and we can just improve some things like, let's see. Okay, maybe improve, just add a little animation to how this drop down itself displays, and we can conditionally change this drop down icon. So I think we've called this drop down icon under the selected item. So let's drop down icon. So what we want to do is, once this drop down icon is displayed, it should change, right? So we can say, we can conditionally give this a class that so we can class bind. This is class binding here. We can say that if it's visible, add to the class drop down, else nothing. So if it's visible, it's going to add this drop down class to this class here. So we can preview this by inspecting this icon here. You can see currently, let me hide this. Currently it's the default name here, which is default class name drop down icon. But once this condition is true, it adds this drop down name to the class name conditionally. So once you can see here, it adds the drop down to the class name, and we can use that to change the state of this in the CSS, right? So this, we want to say the drop down icon dot drop down. Is that the name we gave it? Is that the class name? Drop down, yeah. So what we want is to transform this and rotate 180 degrees, and we also want a transition, and the transition should be all .5 seconds and is. So yeah, this is good. So this is great. So I think we can just do this for the drop down icon. Let's improve this. We want to rotate. I'll just copy this, transform, rotate. We want it at a default stage, it should be 0 degrees. And so since we're using SAS, we can also as well do this. Let me just copy this and yes, so this should give us the same. Great. I love this. So I think we should reduce the animation to this. So yeah, we can also like, I don't like the way this guy just boom displays in front of us, so we can also improve this, and we can do what? We can conditionally also do a class binding to this if instead of using the VIF. So the VIF basically removes it from the DOM, right? So you can also use a vshow. So what the vshow does is very similar. The only difference is the vshow just gives it a display of none, but the VIF takes it away, removes it from the DOM. So we don't want to use this. Instead, we want to use a class bind, and we want to, if it's visible, we would like to add a class called visible to it. Add a class, visible, and else would call it if it's invisible. So yeah, so class binding again. If this condition is true, now this is using the ternary operation inside here. So if this is visible is true, we want to add this to our class name. If not, we want to add this invisible to the class name, the visible and invisible to the class name. So we can use these to, what is the name of the class we're trying to modify? Drop down popover. So in our drop down popover, we can, drop down popover. We can do these by saying visibility should be hidden, right? Yes, it should be hidden by default. Want transition all .4 seconds is in alt, and want to make it a max height of 0 px, and yeah. So at the moment it's not displaying, right, which is what is expected, because we've given it a visibility of hidden, right? And but what we want to do is, if it's visible, remember that this visible class is going to be triggered if it's visible. So what we want to do is visibility should be visible, right? And we want it to have a max height of 450 px. Let's give it 450 px. Oh, great. So with this, I think we should have, okay, this guy is slow. Let's make this 5. Make this linear. So let's see what we've got. Oh, not really the best experience, but let me see. Overflow, hidden. Okay, I think this is, yeah, I think this is better. So remember, this class name here, visible, is being triggered based on the truthfulness or falsefulness of our visibility. So with that, we can display this, and we can run our filter, Irvin, Lepsac, Vuejs. I think we have to Clementine. So great, this is working fine, and we can select our user and do whatever computation you want to do with this. So I think we've covered like a whole lot of things here, and basically this is I'm going to host this on GitHub or host it somewhere so you can have access to the code base, and you can improve this however you like. It's open source, and it's going to be I'm going to open source this, and you can use this for whatever in your project's place of work. You can modify this however you like, and you can change the experience. You can decide to have an input inside this place, just like it is here. So however you want to, you can extend this feature to whatever. You can improve the animation as well. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial.